Hello BookTube. At the start of the year, I set myself a few specific reading goals. Most of those have completely fallen by the wayside by this point, and I have no hope in hell of achieving them, and I no longer really care all that much. Having said that, one of my reading goals was to try and finish more series, because I am really bad for loving a book and then never picking up anything by the author again. And that also goes for series. I'll start a series and then I just won't carry on with it. And so I've been consistently setting myself a goal to read more series, and I'm seeing a lot of people online doing a similar thing. I'll be honest, now that I'm getting into like sci-fi and fantasy books a little bit more, I'm finding that I'm wanting to read series, I'm wanting to carry on with the series that I'm in the middle of. So I thought a nice vlog to do sort of towards the end of the year, because this is the one goal that I am going to easily achieve, is to read a few more series. It was initially, I think, finish 10 series, and by finish I mean either finish a completed series or be fully caught up in a series where there are more books to come but they have not yet been published. I'm pretty sure I'm on like 7 or 8 series completed, and there's multiple series that I'm partway through that I really want to carry on with and finish. Welcome to my series spreadsheet. I cannot take credit for the layout of this. I largely stole it after being inspired by Meg with Books on BookTube. I made a similar thing to her a couple of years ago. As you can see, I probably made it in about 2022. It's worked for me since then. It's been a nice way to track the series that I'm in the middle of and try and keep myself accountable for finishing series that I've started. So I thought we'd go through the spreadsheet together, have a look at the books that I'm close to completing, see what I'm in the mood to read at the minute, and pick some series to crack on with for this vlog. Just to give you an overview of what the spreadsheet is like and what I use it for. This tab tracks my ongoing series. So these are series where I have more books that I need to read to complete them. And then I also have down here series awaiting sequels. For example, The Song of Ice and Fire. Are the ones that I'm in the middle of. Heartstopper, Guide to Dating Vampires, a couple that I started this year that only have one book out so far. That's another thing. I'm not counting it as a completed series if there's only one book out in the series, because you've read one book. That doesn't really feel like an accomplishment. That's the series that I'm currently working my way through. Following on from that, we have completed series. So these are the series that I have finished and all of the books are out and published. As you can see, pretty much fantasy for the most part, with the exception of like the Seasonal Quartet in there by Ali Smith. Little manga series, My Brother's Husband, which is a really lovely series I finished this year. A couple of romance things coming in there as I kind of moved into my romance era. And then I have DNF series. So these are series that I started that I'm not really interested in carrying on with. There's quite a lot in here. I kind of have to be gripped. If you haven't impressed me in the first book, I'm unlikely to give you a second chance to impress me again with your second book. The African Trilogy by Chinua Achebe is a sort of loosely connected group of 3 novels that focus on, I believe, the impacts of colonialism on Nigeria. I read Things Fall Apart. As you can see from my key up here, I've got the different years that I completed things color-coded. I read Things Fall Apart 4 years ago. I would really love to reread it. I do not own either of the 2 following books in the trilogy, so that one's kind of a no-go at the minute until I pick these up. But I've honestly never seen them anywhere, so they may be ones that I have to look at ordering online in the future. And when I do, I would really like to reread Things Fall Apart and then read the 2 next novels in the series. The Jacoby series is a YA series. It's kind of like, how do I describe Jacoby? I really enjoyed this series, even though it is YA. It's kind of like a Sherlock-inspired paranormal mystery series, and I really loved all of the characters in the series, and the mysteries are really fun, but they also have a surprising amount of depth to them. And as you can see, Hi. It's not dinner time yet. I know, but you've got an hour to wait. Yes. Greedy. You can see I've read all of the novels. I've read all 4 novels in that series. The only thing I haven't read that I'm so nitpicky about things that I consider this series unfinished for this reason, as I have not read this novella called The Map, which I don't think you can buy a physical copy of. I think it's only available through the author William Ritter's website or his blog. I would be interested in rereading this series in the future because it is just a lot of fun. It's a very sweet and wholesome, comforting kind of series. So I would like to reread that at some point, but it might be nice to just read the novella as like a way of getting back into the world a little bit and then maybe do a reread in the future. Next series we have is Beartown. I do own all of the Beartown books. However, the problem I have with Beartown is that it has such a broad cast of characters who I think then reoccur in Us Against You and The Winners. And it's a big book as well. It's like almost 500 pages, I think. So I think I would want to reread Beartown, and I would actually like to reread Beartown this winter and get through the other two books as well to finish the series. So maybe early next year, maybe sort of January time will be Beartown's time to shine, but I would definitely like to do a reread of that one. The next series, however, Amgash. 4 books in the series. I only have one left. I own the first 3. I do not own the 4th book. However, I read My Name is Lucy Barton as a physical book a few years ago, 2023. Didn't love it. I thought it was good, but it wasn't like an all-time favourite or anything. And then my husband bought me the next 2 books in the series, so I was like, well, I will carry on then. But I want to read My Name is Lucy Barton again, and I listened to the audiobook from BorrowBox and it was fantastic. I think the narrator of the Amgash series is Kimberly Farr, I want to say, and she just brings these books to life. She's a fantastic audiobook narrator. I decided I didn't really want to buy a physical copy of Lucy by the Sea, and I've listened to the rest of the books on audio rather than reading them physically because I just love the narration of those audiobooks so much. So I know this is on BorrowBox in my library system, so that could be one that I pick up and listen to it while I'm like doing housework and bits. Similar to Beartown with the Neapolitan Quartet, I really enjoyed My Brilliant Friend, but it's been a few years and I think I really need to reread it. Also, because it's like set in the south of Italy, it gives me like summer vibes, this whole series. So I kind of feel like maybe next summer I want to reread My Brilliant Friend and then carry on and finish the rest of the series. And I do only own the second one as well, so I'd have to buy the other 2 books before I could carry them on, unless I got them from the library or whatever. But I loved My Brilliant Friend, so I do feel like I would like to own the physical books so that I can read them, annotate them, you know, things like that. Next is The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley. This is a contender, to be fair. I reread The Watchmaker of Filigree Street on audio this year, and I'm pretty sure The Lost Future of Pepper Harrow is on Everand. I do tend to like to have an ebook on the go for easy reading on like my commute. So that's another potential, is The Lost Future of Pepper Harrow, because again, only 1 book left to finish that series. Murderbot, there's no chance. There's just no chance. I've only read the first Murderbot book, and I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure if I want to carry on with the series yet. And if I do, it might be one that I get them from the library or something like that. I'm not sure they're books that I want to purchase. All Systems Red I read on audio. So yeah, maybe at some point I will carry on with the series when I'm listening to audiobooks a little bit more. I'm not listening to a whole lot of audio at the moment. So Poppy War, again, this is one that I'm putting off because I want to reread the Poppy War before I... Do you see why I set this as a goal? Because I end up not reading the series fast enough, and then I'm like, I need to reread the first book before I can carry on so that I remember what happened. Like, I remember the broader plot points and the ending, obviously. The ending of the Poppy War is pretty unforgettable. My husband kindly bought me the Poppy War and the Dragon Republic in the new editions that came out, the gorgeous hardcover editions. So I'm kind of waiting for them to release The Burning God in those editions so that I can get the whole series and then sit down and reread the Poppy War and then read the other 2 like very close after that. Poppy War is a no-go for this video. The Wayfarers series, as you can see from my my key, anything with a asterisk I own. So I do own the whole Wayfarers series. I loved the first 2 books so dearly. I don't feel like I would need to reread either of those books because I think the next books in the series follow connected characters, like characters who are linked to the characters in the first 2 books, but not the exact same people. I do have 2 left to go though, so maybe not in this vlog, but definitely at some point in the next couple of months I want to read some more Becky Chambers, because I loved these books very, very much. The Boy Meets Boy series is one that I'm kind of like unsure if I want to continue. I read Never Been Kissed and I didn't like it very much. I thought it was very weakly written. The romance was not very believable or interesting, which was a shame because it had like more sort of demi-ace representation. I believe these are available on Everand, possibly as audiobooks, so maybe I'll give them a go at some point. But You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince, I'm pretty sure is a Christmassy romance, so maybe not for this time of year. Day of Fallen Night. Controversial opinion. I thought The Priory of the Orange Tree was mid. I didn't love Priory, which was such a shame because sapphic fantasy with dragons sounds like a perfect book, but it just shouldn't have been a standalone. All of my problems with The Priory of the Orange Tree boil down to the fact that it was a standalone trying to do too much. It needed to be a series. It became a series anyway because she released a prequel, and now there's another one that's come out, I'm pretty sure, as well. All the people going on about how great it was to have a fantasy standalone. It's no longer really a standalone anyway. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. Yeah, not sure if I'm going to read A Day of Fallen Night. My husband told me actually he was considering buying this for me, and then because I didn't enjoy Priory that much, he put it off and he bought me something else. Definitely not one for this vlog. Is available through the library though. I'm pretty sure they've got it on BorrowBox as an ebook, my library, so maybe in the future. I haven't written Samantha Shannon off completely, but Priory was not the book that I hoped it would be. Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. Again, controversial takes all round in this video. I don't like the Brightfall series that much. I don't think Ashley Herring Blake's sapphic romances are all that great. They're certainly not up there with the best contemporary romances I've read. I think they're okay, but I do have my issues with them. And I do not own a copy of Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. I listened to Delilah Green and Astrid Parker on audio when I still had Spotify. I no longer use Spotify, so I don't have access to Iris Kelly Doesn't Date on audio through that. I'm pretty sure I've looked and my library does not have Iris Kelly. So if I want to carry on with the series, I may have to buy it. So I've got it in my Kobo wish list, and I'm kind of hoping that one day it'll be like 99p so that I can get it, because I've heard that it's people's favourite. People I find either like Delilah Green the best or Iris Kelly the best. And I had issues with Delilah Green. Namely, you can't just slap tattoos on a lesbian and call her a butch. That's not how that works. Really not sure how I will go about finishing this series. I do want to read Iris Kelly. I want to give it a chance. I attempted to read Heavenly Tyrant earlier in the year. I got about 100 pages in and then realised that I just simply didn't remember enough from Iron Widow, and I was not having a good time because I couldn't remember any of the specifics of the world. Again, I remembered like the big plot beats, but not enough for me to go, not enough for me to go into Heavenly Tyrant and have a clue what was going on. So I definitely need to reread Iron Widow at some point so I can carry on with Heavenly Tyrant, but I don't think I'm in the mood to do that in this video. As you can see, I've read the other 3 books this year. I've been flying through that series. I've been really enjoying it. However, down here we have another T. Kingfisher series, the Clocktor War duology. I am an occasional attendee of a fantasy and sci-fi book club, and in that group chat people talk about T. Kingfisher quite a lot. Somebody said they had recently read Paladin's Faith, and that anyone who has read the Clocktor War books will get more out of Paladin's Faith, having got the background of those books. So I started reading Clocktor Wars. Clockwork Boys is my favourite T. Kingfisher. It's my favourite T. Kingfisher. I liked it more than any of the books in the Saint of Steel series. I gave it a 5-star. I thought it was fantastic. So I have the Wonder Engine. I bought it on Kobo, and I think that's definitely one that I'm going to want to get to in this video so that I can then go and read Paladin's Faith also and hopefully get the most possible out of it. The Broken Earth trilogy, spoilers potentially for future end of year content, but I think the 5th season is the best book that I've read so far this year. The 5th season is fantastic. It's over 400 pages and I read it in 2 days because I just couldn't put it down. It's unlikely that I would finish that series in this vlog, but I do really want to read The Obelisk Gate. I very much want to read it. Also, I own these now. I haven't updated this. I went into town specifically to go to Waterstones to get these 2 books because I only owned the 5th season and I'd read it and wanted to immediately carry on with the series. And I stopped in my local Oxfam bookshop first and they had both of these in brand new condition. I was landed. I took them to the till and the volunteer at the till was like, "Oh, funny, I just donated these." I was very, very pleased with myself on that day. So I do own both of these, and yeah, I may just end up picking up Obelisk Gate in this vlog anyway because I want to read it so badly, even though I probably won't then read The Stone Sky straight away because I like to ration things a little bit when I love them. Wisconsin Gothic is a series I've never had anybody talk about. I just came across the first book, Dionysus in Wisconsin, on Everand and just read it on a whim and enjoyed it quite a bit. And it wasn't like a new favourite, and there were some issues with like some of the pacing and stuff. I found it to be a unique take on sort of a mythological retelling. I found out after the fact that it is part of a series, but I don't think Everand has any of these other books in their catalogue. You shouldn't be here. Whoops. Finish that series. I don't think I'm going to be able to carry on with Dionysus in Wisconsin or Wisconsin Gothic for the foreseeable until I can get these somewhere. Brent Boys is a series of contemporary queer romances. I read Paper Boys on Everand this year, just like a really fun time. And I'm pretty sure Going Solo is also on Everand, so that's another potential that I could pick up for an ebook. However, not sure where to get this novella. We'll need to do some research into that. Nashville Love series. I would have considered DNFing this series after Love and Other Disasters, which I didn't enjoy at all. A lot of issues with that romance, wasn't really into it. Not that it was like problematic or anything. I didn't like the way that it was written. I just thought it was a poorly written romance. I wasn't into it. I had already found the sequel, Something Wild and Wonderful, in the charity shop. So I already own Something Wild and Wonderful. The Wonder Engine, I'm going to read. I'm going to read The Wonder Engine. I've wanted to read it since I bought it on Kobo. I've been holding off, and I can hold off no longer. I want to read the rest of the Clock Tower War duology. I'm enjoying it very, very much. And then finally, Seducing the Sedgwicks is a Cat Sebastian historical queer romance series. I love Cat Sebastian. One of my completed series is We Could Be So Good. I think they're now called the Mid-Century NYC books on Storygraph. I don't know, Storygraph doesn't always have the most up-to-date information or correct information about books and series. I'm pretty sure it doesn't list the Brent Boys as a series, but the author considers them to be a series, or has posted about them being a series on his Instagram, so I've included them as a series, even though they may not look that way on Storygraph. But yeah, I love We Could Be So Good and You Should Be So Lucky. You Should Be So Lucky might be my favourite romance book ever. As you can see, I read it this year, so potentially that could be recency bias. However, it's a perfect romance. There's nothing I can say to criticise it at all. I think it's fantastic. I think it's absolutely wonderful. We Could Be So Good I also love dearly. Mark Bailey is probably my favourite character from any book that I've read. So like all year, I think he's wonderful. It Takes Two to Tumble. Again, didn't love it. I had issues with the pacing, and the problem is I find that when you're reading a romance, if you have issues with the pacing, I often then have issues with the way that the romance develops because the pacing is off. And then I don't like the pacing, I don't like the relationship. And that's kind of the whole reason you're there if you're reading a romance. So if you don't like the relationships, you're kind of doomed. I thought it was just fine, just like aggressively average. I have bought A Gentleman Never Keeps Score on Kobo because one of the saving graces of It Takes Two to Tumble is the main character's brother, who doesn't appear in it very much, sadly, to the detriment of the book, because he's great. I love him. I think his name is Hartley. I could be wrong. I don't know. Yeah, he's fantastic. I think he was a great and underutilized character in that book. And A Gentleman Never Keeps Score is his romance. So I'm holding out hope that the series will improve because the next book is about this character who is potentially called Harley. That is where we're at. that is my series overview. This is everything that I'm kind of in the middle of. It's too many things. I think definitely it's worth me reading the map. I think I could do that in like an hour one evening, just sit at my desk and read the novella and have a fun little cozy time. Lucy by the Sea, if it's available at the moment on BorrowBox, if no one else is listening to it, I definitely want to pick that up and finish that series. I've really enjoyed listening to that series this year, and that would be a nice easy one to finish, so that would be 2. Wonder Engine, again, definitely going to read that. There's a possibility I may also pick up the Obelisk Gate and make some progress in the Broken Earth trilogy. But then again, Seducing the Sedgwicks I'm really tempted to pick up as well, so that it's not just like all fantasy. I suppose Lucy by the Sea isn't fantasy either, so that would mix things up a little bit. But that's kind of where my head is at right now. Those are the things that I'm thinking I would like to pick up. I'll check in with you again once I've made a start on some of the books that we talked about. We'll let you know if I can get Lucy by the Sea, and I'm probably going to start the Wonder Engine tonight because I don't have any books on the go at the minute, and it feels like everything is wrong with the world. So I need to pick up a book ASAP and make everything right again. So yeah, probably going to make a start on the Wonder Engine later, and I will let you know my thoughts when I've read some. Hi bookish people, a little reading update. I did decide to start reading The Wonder Engine by Kingfisher, and I've now finished it. I think it was quite a bit longer than the first book in the series. Kobo had it at 550 odd pages, something like that, but I flew through it. I absolutely adored it, just as much as the first book in the series, so I've given both of them a 5-star. Honestly, my favourite books from T. Kingfisher so far. I know I've got a lot more of her books to read. She has an enormous backlist, and I haven't read any of her horror as of yet. But from her fantasy offerings so far, my favourites have definitely been Clockwork Boys and The Wonder Engine, and I enjoyed them equally as much as each other. I couldn't really pick out which one was best. This is just a solid duology that I loved from start to finish. I don't think I gave you much of an idea of what the series was about in the introduction to this vlog, so I'll talk a little bit now about what the series is about. I won't go into the Wonder Engine too much, obviously, because we'll go into spoiler territory for the first book. The overall plot, we're in the same world as the Saint of Steel series, so Paladin's Grace, Paladin's Hope, etc. But I believe quite a few years before, possibly even centuries before. I'm not sure. My timeline is not... My timeline is fuzzy. I don't know exactly when we are. I think it's set quite substantially before the events of the Saint of Steel series. In this duology, we are following a group of characters who have come from one city that is at war with a neighbouring city and are struggling substantially in this war due to the introduction of something that they call clockwork boys, which are these huge clockwork structures that have come to life somehow. They're about 10 feet tall and they just absolutely destroy everything in their path. Sorry, I'm distracted because my cat is laying across my feet and purring her head off right now. So the ruler of this city is at her wit's end. So in a last-ditch attempt to end the war, or at least to even figure out where these creatures are coming from and how they can be destroyed, the Dowager had enlisted the services of a convicted forger called Slate. And Slate has brought together a small band of criminals plus a very naive follower of the many-armed god. So he's kind of like a priest type character. And they've all come together on what is essentially a suicide mission to get to Anarchist City and figure out where the Clockwork Boys are coming from and if they can be destroyed. You follow Slate the Forger, who is the leader of this group, Brenna, who is an assassin, a convicted assassin, and Caliban, who is a paladin of the Dreaming God. Can you stop rubbing against the tripod? Leave the tripod alone, baby. Who has been cast out from his temple. In this world, followers of the Dreaming God are essentially demon hunters. They go out and exorcise people who have become possessed by demons, kill them if needs be, bind the demons, send them back to wherever they've come from. And Caliban has been convicted of murder after being possessed by a demon and going on a killing spree within the temple of the Dreaming God. So he is no longer a part of the temple and he is just essentially facing life imprisonment for the murders that he committed while under possession. Basically team up on this suicide mission to figure out what these Clockwork Boys are and whether they can be destroyed. And it is T. Kingfisher at what I currently believe to be her best. Like I said, I've never read any of her horror and I have only read the Saint of Steel series, A Sorceress Comes to Call, and the Clock-Tor War duology, which is really hard to say actually. Clock-Tor War is really difficult to say. This duology is T. Kingfisher's amazing blend of like a very dark fantasy situation with war and plague and bloodshed and indestructible monsters and silly cozy vibes. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. The humour in these books is fantastic. The character's dynamic is so wonderful. Learned Edmund, who is like the priest-like character, he is a acolyte or a follower of the Many-Armed God, which is an order of raging misogynists who have nothing to do with women and just hunker away in search of knowledge, and they're very kind of removed from society. He goes from being an incredibly annoying and frustrating character to just being this absolute sweetheart by the end of the 2 books. The dynamics of the characters throughout is just so enjoyable to read. It is such a good time. I found the pacing of both books to be perfect. Like I've said before, I have some issues with the Saint of Steel series, which is mainly around the pacing. I find the pacing in those books isn't as tight as I'd like it to be, but in Clockwork Boys and The Wonder Engine, it's just perfect. We're moving at exactly the right pace that gives us enough action and enough development of the key mystery about what these creatures are, but also enough breathing room in between to have these really funny and delightful character moments that really endear you to every single character that we meet on this journey, even Learned Edmund. Like, nothing feels out of place, nothing feels pointless, everything ties together really beautifully to make a really cohesive story, a really strong narrative. They're some of my favourite books that I've read all year. This world is just the perfect blend of sweet and cozy moments versus actually quite dark and intriguing mysteries. And I've really enjoyed the development of the world in this duology and throughout the Saint of Steel. I just love being in this world. It's like one of my comfort places at this point. It's just being immersed in this world of the White Rat. Really happy to have finished that duology so that I can now go back and read Paladin's Faith, which is currently the last book that has been released in the Saint of Steel series, but I think there are supposed to be 3 more because there are 7 paladins at the core of that series. So I think there's 1 book for each paladin. That brings us to 1 series finished so far in the vlog. And this may seem a bit counterintuitive. It may have made more sense possibly to go with series that I have 1 book outstanding in, but I don't really care. I've started A Gentleman Never Keeps Score by Sebastian, which is the 2nd book in a trilogy, what's currently a trilogy. I don't know if there's going to be more. I don't think so. I think this is a finished trilogy. I was very tempted to start reading The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, but I worried that if I jumped from a fantasy to a fantasy, I might get fantasied out. But I'm not sure that that's going to happen because I'm really in my fantasy era right now, I think. But nonetheless, I have started A Gentleman Never Keeps Score, and I was correct before when I said that this follows Hartley Sedgwick. This is the 2nd book in a series, so I'm not going to go into much spoiler territory. I'm going to keep it a little bit vague. But the core premise of this series is you have the Sedgwick brothers, I believe 3 of whom are men interested in other men. In the first book in this series, It Takes Two to Tumble, you're following Ben Sedgwick, who is a clergyman who has been enlisted to assist in the rearing of the Dacre children, who are 3 very unruly children who are kind of terrorising everybody in the village in their sea captain father's absence. Ben sort of gets involved with trying to care for these 3 children. They've scared away all of their governesses and nannies and so forth. So out of desperation, Ben is approached and asked if he can get involved with trying to help out with the children. And he does. And then their father comes back from being away at sea. And it is about how they kind of initially come to blows, but then, grow to form quite a close relationship and eventually a romantic relationship. Then in this 2nd book, as I said, we're following Hartley Sedgwick. And I don't want to go into too much of the plot because in the 1st book, a secret is revealed about Hartley that forms the basis for the plot of the 2nd book. So I'm not going to go into detail about what that secret is, but at the beginning of this book, Hartley has kind of been involved in London society and has now rapidly been cast out of society and is increasingly isolated. All of his staff are quitting, and he comes to meet this pub owner called Sam Fox, who is on the hunt for a painting of his friend that was commissioned by Hartley's godfather. And this painting is a great source of shame for his friend, and so he wants to get it back or know that it has been destroyed so that she can kind of move on with her life. You've got chicken on your nose. This cat is so gross. So Sam wants to recover this painting if possible so that his friend can kind of move on with her life and forget that this part of her life happened. And so Hartley and Sam kind of team up to track down this collection of sordid paintings that his godfather owned. And yeah, on the way, they're gonna fall in love, obviously. It's a historical romance. So far, I'm 20% of the way through now, so a little bit of the way through. So far, I'm enjoying this one a lot more than It Takes Two to Tumble. The pacing, it always comes down to the pacing for me. When I'm reading a romance, I think the most important thing is honestly the pacing. Maybe tied with the characterization, obviously, because I need to care about the characters and I need their romance to unfold in a satisfying way, okay? And that is so dependent on the pacing. I don't think this is gonna be a situation of mutual yearning and pining by any means, but I do think that it's gonna unfold a little bit more slowly than It Takes Two to Tumble, which was very rushed in my opinion. It felt very unnatural. It felt, considering that these are historical romances set in a time period where it was not legal to be gay, sometimes these historical romances unfold way too fast for me. I feel like it would be much more realistic for men to be very cautious around one another and to reveal those parts of themselves in a much slower manner for their own safety. So when you have men, historical romances, barreling forward and getting involved really quickly, it feels quite unrealistic. And I'm like, that's not to say that sexual encounters didn't happen in that way, but you kind of knew where you were going to get that kind of action, if you know what I mean. Like, there were places that if you were in the know, you went and you could hook up with other men. Whereas if you're getting into a real romantic relationship with another man in this time period, you can't just go and announce that you're into dudes. It's not 2025. You can't just be like, yeah, I'm a gay man. You have to maneuver with a degree of caution. And so when in historical romances men get involved really fast, or women for that matter as well, when you have these queer characters getting involved really quickly, it doesn't feel very realistic to me. And also, I just love yearning, okay? I'm not interested in insta-love. Doesn't work for me. Just yearn, just pine. Where is the pining? Where is the pathetic, grovelly, I'll never be good enough for him yearning? That's what I want. I want to yearn. If the characters aren't yearning, then I am switched off. I'm not interested. They gotta yearn. They gotta be pathetic, and they've gotta pine for good 50% of the novel. I would like them to pine for 50% of the novel, at least. At least. The point at which I'm up to now, the characters are definitely interested in each other, and they've definitely made some forward and flirty comments. So I do feel like we're gonna maybe move into the relationship and the romance a little bit quickly, but it feels a lot more natural in the way that it's unfolding compared to the first book in this series. So far, I'm happy, but as I said in the intro, like, this is like not my favourite Cat Sebastian by any stretch. Like, mid-century NYC is Cat Sebastian writing like the perfect queer romance novel, and so far these have just been fine. So we'll see how I get on. They are pretty quick reads though, so there is a chance that if I finish A Gentleman Never Keeps Score, I may pick up the third one. I may end up reading that in this vlog, or I may just make progress in the series and leave it there. But yeah, I will come back and update you when I'm a little bit further through Gentleman Never Keeps Score, or maybe when I finished it, because like I said, it is reading pretty quickly. So yeah, I will be back and I will let you know my thoughts. Good evening. I have a little reading update for you. I've now finished reading A Gentleman Never Keeps Score by Cat Sebastian, and as I suspected, I did enjoy it a lot more than the first book in the series, It Takes Two to Tumble. As I think I said in my previous update, Hartley is just such a more interesting character than Ben, which I think is part of the reason I didn't get on with the first book in the series as much as this one. Hartley is just so much more interesting to read about. He's so much more complex. He's got, you know, these skeletons in his closet, whereas Ben is very kind of naive and blinkered, and he just is a little bit of a golden retriever sort of energy, just sees the good in people. Whereas Hartley, on the other hand, is kind of grouchy. He has some pretty serious trauma that he's been through that makes him very distrustful of people. He also has some issues around sex, which is something that I didn't expect or know going into this book, but it really made for a much more tender development of the relationship between him and Sam. I'm not somebody who's particularly bothered about spice in books. I can take it or leave it, but I do think if you're going to include a lot of spice and a lot of sex scenes in your book, it feels much more fulfilling as a reading experience if they have some kind of deeper meaning, if they reveal something about the character or the relationship. I think smut for smut's sake can be kind of boring to read and get very repetitive. The scenes in this book didn't read like that at all, because you've got Hartley on the one hand who has trauma that makes it really difficult for him to be touched by men, and then you have Sam on the other hand who is a black man whose relationships have always kind of revolved around him fulfilling a sexual fantasy for his partners of what a black partner is supposed to act like, which I thought was a really interesting thing for Cat Sebastian to explore, and I really liked that she did that, because I feel like that is a stereotype that we see forced onto black characters in romance books, is they're expected to be these very strong, hyper-masculine men and be very dominant in a sexual setting. And when Hartley and Sam get together, you see Sam's delight in the fact that he isn't expected to fulfill that role anymore, because Hartley isn't needing that from him, because that's not what Hartley wants from him. Hartley needs a much slower paced scenario where he gets to be very much in control of what is and isn't happening. And it's really quite lovely to see both of these characters being fulfilled by something that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in a romantic dynamic in smut, basically. It made the scenes feel very fresh and very interesting, and it also made you feel a lot of empathy for both of the characters in what they've been through in previous relationships with men. So I enjoyed that aspect of it a lot. I also found that the pacing was much more realistic in this novel. You have Hartley and Sam who are from different class backgrounds, and they navigate that in quite a realistic way. You see them being really drawn to one another on the one hand, and then on the other hand not being able to fully throw themselves into the relationship because they know that it's going to be an unequal kind of power imbalance because of the nature of Hartley's inheritance. He has now become a gentleman and he is in a much more financially secure situation than Sam is. I enjoyed seeing the both of them respond to that in different ways and seeing how they were able to navigate through it together. So I ended up settling on a 4-star for this one. It's still not my favourite Cat Sebastian. I'm not sure that she can ever top You Should Be So Lucky for me, because I'm obsessed with that book. I think about that book all the time. I want to reread that book all the time. The fact that I've only read it the once so far this year is quite impressive, because I easily could have read it another 3 times, I think. But I've been sensible to prioritise other things that are on my TBR. I'm glad that I stuck with the series and that I've carried on with it. Not only because I found Hartley to be a much more interesting character and his romance to be a lot more compelling than the romance in the first book, but also the ending of A Gentleman Never Keeps Score is wild. I had some vague notion that I was maybe going to carry on with the Broken Earth trilogy after reading this. No, I immediately bought Two Rogues Make a Right, and I'm almost 50% of the way through. I'm loving this one. I'm really enjoying the dynamic of this third book in the series. I just couldn't not. I don't want to tell you what the ending is, because it's a spoiler. It's the end of the second novel and it's the setup for the third novel. So if you want to find out what the ending is, you can very easily just go to Goodreads or Storygraph and look up the synopsis of book 3. So I'm not going to tell you, but it is wild. And I needed to know what the fuck was going on immediately. So I have now started the third book in the series and I am almost 50% of the way through. So I'm sorry for not coming on and updating you sooner, but I am just flying through these books. They're so pacey, so easy to read and read quickly. But to give you a brief synopsis of Two Rogues Make a Right without going into spoiler territory, the third book in the series follows Will Sedgwick, who again is so much more interesting than Ben. I'm sorry to Ben for all of this Ben slander, but he's just an incredibly boring character. He's just nice. He's just nice, and that's all there is to him, it feels like at points. Whereas Will and Hartley are both kind of damaged. They've both been through some shit, and it makes them much more interesting as characters. They're both messy in a way that I enjoy reading about. In Two Rogues Make a Right, we're following Will Sedgwick, who has been childhood best friends with a character called Martin Easterbrook, who we meet briefly in the first book and who is mentioned and alluded to in the second book. And interestingly, he has been painted as kind of the villain of the piece through the eyes of the older Sedgwick brothers for the first two books. Whereas Will has a very different relationship to Martin. They've been friends since they were small, and they've maintained a friendship into adulthood, whereas the other Sedgwick brothers have kind of left Martin by the wayside and they're not really interested in having anything to do with him. At the beginning of Two Rogues Make a Right, Martin and Will come back together after a period of absence, and it's their romance from here. But I don't want to give anything away because spoilers for the ending of the second book. To give you an idea of the setup and the dynamic, it's very much like forced proximity. Will and Martin are shoved together into this scenario where Will is forced to care for Martin. They're kind of dealing with the fact that their friendship has become strained over time by various outside scenarios and situations. They're kind of working on rebuilding their friendship and also working through the fact that Martin has been in love with Will since they were kids, and Will is kind of starting to realise his own attraction to Martin and wondering whether they can take that friendship further or if that's going to kind of ruin everything. I'm really enjoying this so far. I read, I think, 43% of the book last night. I just flew through it and I'm really excited to pick it up again tonight. I've finished work, I need to make some dinner, and then I don't really have any plans. So I'm probably going to sit down and read the rest of Two Rogues Make a Right because it's not very long and I'm really compelled. I'm really interested to see where it goes. This one has a lot more of the kind of mutual yearning and pining that I just love in a book. Like, they're only just starting to get to the point now where they're acknowledging that they have feelings for one another, and we're almost halfway there. So I'm like, thank you, Cat Sebastian. Thank you. I neglected to tell you this sooner, but I also reserved the audiobook of Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout from BorrowBox. And my hold for that came through on Saturday. It is now Monday. I've listened to maybe an hour, just over an hour of the audiobook. So that's going to be the book that I listen to while I'm kind of doing household stuff, maybe start a new crochet project and listen to that over the next couple of days as well. It follows Lucy Barton, obviously all of the books are about Lucy Barton or people connected to Lucy Barton, but this one is set at the beginning of the pandemic when Lucy and her ex-husband William shack up together in Maine because they need to get out of New York. William is a scientist and is very aware of what is kind of going on with the virus in a way that Lucy is not. And he gets them both out of the city to quarantine in Maine, and we're going to see how it goes from there. These aren't super plot heavy books. They're very literary, very kind of slow pondering of relationships and familial dynamics and that kind of thing. So I think this is going to focus again very much on Lucy and her relationship to her ex-husband, which is a really interesting relationship, and I do enjoy hearing about them together as a former couple who have maintained a friendship because they have two children together, and they maintain that friendship even though the both of their children are in adulthood, and they are both like in their 70s, I think, and they're still very close, but you can tell they also still feel weirdly about each other at various points. You have this kind of closeness that you can only really achieve by being married to someone for such a long period of time and sharing such a huge portion of your life with them and having children with them, and then splitting up and living separate lives that are still so very intertwined. And it's a very unique relationship dynamic that I do enjoy hearing about. So yeah, I'm going to carry on listening to that, and that's probably going to be my reading plans for the vlogs. I'm going to shoot off, have some dinner, and then probably just curl up on the sofa and carry on reading Two Rogues Make a Right because I'm so into that book. I'm really having a great time with it. So I will catch you up when I've read a bit more of that and when I have some more thoughts on Lucy by the Sea. final reading update of the vlog. Apologies for the kind of rubbish lighting. We're back at my PC desk again for the final update. I have now finished reading 2 books. I have finished Two Rogues Make a Right and Lucy by the Sea. I'll give you a little update about what I thought of both of those, and then we will have a look and see how many series I've managed to finish and whether I've managed to hit my goal of 10. Last time I spoke to you, I was having a pretty great time reading Two Rogues Make a Right by Sebastian. My enjoyment did peter out a little bit in the second half of the novel, unfortunately. It just felt a little bit like the author had too many variables that she wanted to fit into the central conflict as to what is keeping these two people apart and why they haven't managed to get it together. Because of that, in the second half the novel started to feel really muddled, and it didn't really feel like we had a clear sense of the conflict and why the two main characters were struggling to find a way to be together. And so because of that, I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I didn't like it as much as Gentleman Never Keeps Score, but I did enjoy it more than It Takes Two to Tumble, the first book in the series. I just wanted a bit of a tighter narrative. I think there was a lot of sort of weird miscommunication that was a little bit annoying to read. The ending was fluffy and lovely, as you would expect from a Cat Sebastian book. I have just this evening finished Lucy by the Sea. I was going to pop on and update you before I finished it, but then I realised I only had 52 minutes left of the audiobook. So I thought there wasn't really a lot of point. I was like, I'll just finish it and then update you and finish out the vlog. Lucy by the Sea was another difficult one for me. I did enjoy parts of it. The central premise of the book is about Lucy and her ex-husband William getting out of New York at the beginning of the pandemic and isolating basically in rural Maine. And it just, there was something that felt very tone deaf about choosing to focus on these privileged white people who could afford to uproot their lives to move out of a major metropolitan city and go and live in rural Maine for a while and just hunker down and see out the pandemic that way. And their kids do the same thing, and it was annoying at parts to read about these people who just had that option, and it didn't really focus a whole lot on people who had to stick it out in their homes throughout the pandemic. It rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, having to focus on that aspect of the pandemic. I understand that it happened, but then reading about the struggles of those people, it felt a little bit trivial in comparison at times, because you know that not many people had that option at the time. People did have to struggle it out in very cramped living conditions in cities where their risk of contracting COVID was significantly higher. There were elements of the book I really enjoyed, Elizabeth Strout really excels at exploring interpersonal relationships and the complexities about the way that we feel about each other. Her relationship dynamics that she explores are really quite muddy and they're not very clear cut. Lucy and William are a really good example of that, given that they are a divorced couple with adult children, so arguably don't need to be in each other's lives as strongly, saying that as an adult child of two divorced parents. There's definitely room to be less involved with your ex-partner once your children are in adulthood if you've split. But Lucy and William are very friendly and they're very involved in each other's lives, and so it's a very interesting dynamic, and I really do enjoy their relationship and hearing about them and the ways that their relationship is evolving and changing over time. But then there were other parts of the novel which frustrated me in addition to the narrative framing of it. Obviously the murder of George Floyd and the then sort of rise of BLM was a big cultural shifting point that occurred around the same time as the pandemic. The novel touches on these very political divides that are still very prevalent and very current in the States right now and in other places around the world, but obviously this book is focused on the States. So Lucy has very complex feelings about obviously the police brutality and the violence that is being reported on, and seeing people at these protests and supporting ultimately what they're talking about and what they're protesting for. But then at the same time, in Maine, she's befriending people who she can recognise don't hold the same political beliefs as herself. And she gives those people a lot of grace, given everything that has gone down in global politics over the last few years. It was a frustrating thing to have to then read about a privileged white woman not calling out her friends. But there were other times when the novel really touched me. Lucy's relationship with her siblings comes up again in this novel, and that's something that I always really enjoy reading about. I felt a similar way, to be honest, to the second book in the series, Anything is Possible, which I would have ended up really loving if it weren't for some elements of the novel that felt a bit problematic to me. The focus on Pete Barton, Lucy's brother in particular, I found very touching, but there was just so much fat phobia throughout that book. Characters talking about each other's weight and talking about, oh, this woman is fat, this woman is ugly, or whatever, which you can talk about in a novel, don't get me wrong, but then I feel like there needs to be a critique of it, or you need to be kind of self-aware of it, whereas this felt just very thrown in there. It was very, very jarring. Felt kind of similar with Lucy by the Sea. There were parts I was really enjoying, and then there were other parts where I was like eye rolling a little bit and I felt very frustrated by. So again, I gave this one a 3.5 star, and I would still recommend checking out the Amgash series if you haven't already. It's a very popular and beloved series. He's been, I think, nominated for the Women's Prize twice for books in those interconnected series. I'm not sure if I will carry on and read her other books about Olive Kitteridge and Bob Burgess. I don't know. I could be tempted, especially if the audiobooks are narrated by Kimberly Farr, because she is fantastic as an audiobook narrator. She injects so much life into the characters. I really enjoy her narration. Maybe if they're available in the library or Borrow Box, I will check those out in the future, but I'm definitely not rushing to check them out. This was a very disjointed reading experience for me, the entire series. I loved My Name is Lucy Barton so much on the audiobook reread of it. The first time I read it, I felt pretty neutral about it, to be honest, but I felt it was one of those that maybe if I gave it a second shot later on down the line, I could get more out of it. And I was right. I did really love that reading experience. I reread it this year, I think, and I gave it a 5 star. And then O. William, similarly, I really loved. I think I gave it like 4.5. And then Anything is Possible and Lucy by the Sea were much more difficult reading experiences for me. So overall a mixed bag, but I'm still glad I read the series, and I would recommend it if you like sort of slower, ponderous, reflective literary fiction. Now the reading update is out of the way, let's have a little look through my spreadsheet together. Welcome back to my series spreadsheet. So the first book that I read for this vlog was The Wonder Engine, which was the absolute standout of the vlog for me. I love that series so much. I gave both books 5 stars. If I had to pick a favourite out of the two, The Wonder Engine might just edge it out for me. After the pacing of Clockwork Boys as well, and everything that happened in it was really interesting, but The Wonder Engine did propel the relationships between the characters forward in a way that I really enjoyed. So if I was forced to choose, like at gunpoint, maybe it would be The Wonder Engine, but I loved both very, very much. So we'll take that over here and pop it in my completed series and delete that row. Then I read these two, Gentleman Never Keeps Score and Two Rogues Make a Right. Standout of the series was A Gentleman Never Keeps Score, which I did really enjoy. The other two were a little bit more of a mixed bag for me. I think Cat Sebastian has definitely come on significantly as a writer between sort of Two Rogues Make a Right, what was that, 2020, and You Should Be So Lucky. I feel like you can really see her development of her craft as a writer if you read this series versus the mid-century New York City books. Let's delete that one. And then you'll notice I did not read the map in this vlog. It continues to evade me, even though it is a tiny novella on a blog, and I could probably read it in about an hour. I just didn't get to it. I just did not get to it in this video. Maybe at some point in the future, because I finished reading the last book in the series in 2023. It's been 2 years. I really should just read the map and get it over and done with. But I didn't do that this time around, so let's just move swiftly on from there. That is also the wrong colour again. And then Amgash, which brings me to 3 completed series in the vlog, which I think is pretty good going, especially considering I read 2 books for the Seducing the Sedgwick series. That means I have read 10 series in 2025, or finished 10 series in 2025, which is really good going because I am such a terrible series finisher. I just read the first book in the series, I'm like, God, that was really good, and then I never pick up the sequel. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm probably gonna read Paladin's Faith as well now that I've read the Clocktor War duology. I'll probably go back and read Paladin's Faith within the next couple of weeks as well. Which will bring me up to 11, maybe even. Incredible. Who could have foreseen? So I've really enjoyed actually getting into series more this year. Some of the series I still have on the go. I would love to read the Beartown series and finish that this winter, sort of maybe January time. I would love that. Neapolitan Quartet, this feels like a summary read. I would love to maybe read that whole series in summer 2026. And then just so many of these little ones where I need to read one book and I'm caught up. How annoying. But I will get there. I'm really happy with how this is developing. I've been really enjoying getting stuck into more series in 2025, so I think that's definitely going to be on the agenda for my reading in 2026. I think I'm definitely going to be picking up more series, particularly fantasy series and romance series. I don't know what it is at the minute. I used to be a big literary fiction girly, but now I'm like all about that genre fiction and I'm having a great time, so I can't complain. If you've finished any particularly fantastic series in 2025, let me know in the comments. Any recommendations for great series that you would recommend I check out, leave them all down below. It would mean a lot to me if you liked the video and subscribed to my channel if you fancy seeing more from me. And until then, stay safe and happy reading.